How's it going, everybody? And welcome to Ask Me Anything About Politics. This is the show where you can ask me anything about politics that you like, and I will do my best to give you a great answer. I know that politics can be really intimidating when you're first trying to learn about it. It can feel like trying to learn a new language, and it can be especially confusing these days with all of the misinformation and propaganda that is running rampant out there. And so, where can you go? Where can you turn to try to ask your questions about politics without running into that same old nonsense, the same old misinformation and propaganda? Well, you can come right here, and I will do my best to give you a substantive, accurate, and what's the word I'm looking for? As unbiased as humanly possible answer to your question. There's no debates here. There's no roasting. There's no, um, what do you call it? There's no debates. This is not a place for name calling or, you know, making fun of people for their questions. I don't make fun of people for not knowing things or trying to learn new things. I am just here to answer all of your good faith questions about politics, regardless of if you are a Democrat or Republican, something in between, something on the outskirts. What's up, JP? Good to see you again. So yeah, any questions about politics? Just throw them in the chat. What's up, Muzz King? Good to see you again. And we will get to answering those questions as soon as possible. What's up, Triska? Good to see you too. Alrighty, yeah, everybody's welcome here. Republican, Democrat, everything in between, everything on the outskirts. This is a place for good faith engagement, so I'm not gonna get into fights with people. I'm not gonna try to convince people that you're stupid or ill-informed or anything. Misty Lane says, I'm here to debate and roast, and that's all I'm here to do. I mean, I can't stop you, Misty Lane. I can just encourage you to not do that. Antic says, do you think there's ever going to be a red line Trump crosses that enrages Republicans? So, before the whole thing with the fellow at the island and the plane and all those files, I would have said no, 100% not. But it really does seem like this is an issue that is breaking through for whatever reason. And so, yeah, it really seems like if anything is going to do it, is going to be this. But affordability also maybe seems like it is breaking through as well, where Trump is going out there and saying, regularly, hey, prices are down, and things have never been more affordable than they are now, as he is building a golden ballroom and spending taxpayer dollars to retrofit a free plane that he got from the Qatari Royals. So yeah, there's a possibility, but I don't think that we should count on that. I don't think that we should, what do you call it? I don't think that we should wait for that to happen before we actively try to take our country back from this fascist regime. And wow, 3 minutes in, we've already hit my gift goal. Thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Muzz King. Thank you, Dan Blackroy. Thank you, Triska. We're off to a banging start. All right, let's see here. Cameron League 08 says, in my opinion, the best candy bar is. Yeah, I'm not going to go ahead and say that. Sim says, why does it seem like nobody wins with politics? Do you just have to conform or what? I mean, there are definitely, things that are different depending on who is in charge, and certain people's lives get better and certain people's lives get worse depending on who is in charge. And so, yeah, I know it can feel sometimes like nothing ever changes or that all of our lives just keep on getting worse. But there are people alive today because of the Affordable Care Act, and there are women who are dead today because of abortion bans. And so, yes, it 100% makes a difference. All right, Fog of War, good to see you again. Since this generational thing too, boomers remain loyal to Trump, younger conservatives don't like him anymore. Yeah, we are already, I mean, we see like the extremist wing of the Republican Party breaking with him a little bit, like Nick Fuentes, and then you always have the civility police Republicans who are like, well, I don't like all of his Twitter nonsense and whatnot. Average Joe, good to see you again. I'm excited for you to be here as well, Misty Lane. DJ, good afternoon to you too. Beamer says, have you seen the both of these nuts, Beamer? Okay. Antic says, yeah, I think young Republicans are more right. Do you mean more correct or more right wing? Let's see here. Okay. Scrolling up. Donnie says, based on your comments, who in the right mind would ask you a question about politics? I mean, I know a lot about it, Donnie. So thank you, user, a bunch of numbers. Caesar says, do you believe that red and blue is just a form of division? So yes, but there is a difference between the politicians on the left and the politicians on the right, and the platform on the left and the platform on the right, and outcomes on the left and outcomes of the right. I do not believe that voters should be fighting amongst themselves. I do not believe that voters should be getting into screaming matches or calling each other stupid or fascist or lib cucks or whatever, because that is the division that we are fighting against. That is the billionaire class telling us that our enemies are other voters or trans kids or immigrants or progressives or centrists or, you know, MAGA people. You know, that is where I think the fallacy of division really, the rubber really meets the road there. Kingston says, if we do get to the point where Trump does leave office in 29, and should he lose in the next presidential election, and let's say maybe it's Newsom, do you think he could be a good president? And do you think he would be able to undo all the crazy BS Trump has done to this country? I mean, yes. I think that what one of the strengths that Newsom has is that he seems like he is ready and willing to be the kind of aggressive, left-leaning leader that we are looking for. Like, we want somebody who's not going to sort of like be wishy-washy about undoing all the shit that Donald Trump has done. Where the criticism of Newsom comes around is in that he, you know, is not unsusceptible to the kind of financial incentives that politicians sometimes are, where if somebody is a major donor to his campaign, he will sometimes push legislation a little bit in that direction. And while I don't think that anything that Newsom has done is as egregious as the shit that Republicans are doing, like with the spending bill, they basically made it so that every Republican who was investigated in the January 6th election gets like $5 million or some shit like that. And, you know, all of the favors that Trump is doing to businesses that buy his cryptocurrency and donate to his ballroom and shit like that. But he's definitely not 100% clean. And I think that we in the Democratic Party should be okay with Democrats not being 100% clean, so long as they are better than the alternative. But yeah, you know, I think there's a possibility that he does that. He does both the good and the bad parts of that. Shork says, why did Newsom veto universal health care in his state? I'm not 100% sure. If I remember correctly, his explanation for that is that he couldn't make it work financially. Like, it just, the numbers didn't track. But I have not looked into that, unfortunately. Fletch Lives Again says, do you think any bad policies he made that won't be reversed but may be embraced once Trump is out? I mean, you know, thinking about it, the only policies that I can think of that kind of fall under that umbrella usually have to do with the military or war powers. I can imagine a Democratic president not getting rid of all of the, you know, sort of like levers of power that have been sucked up by the Trump administration, because it's you know, I don't know, there's like momentum towards keeping authority and keeping power in that way. I hope that they don't, but that's a possibility, I suppose. I wouldn't even predict that it's going to happen, but if anything, it's probably going to be stuff like that. Drew says Dems need a candidate and they need one now. I disagree with that, Drew. I don't think there's any problem with a long and healthy primary process where we truly vet all of our candidates and the voters get to decide who's going to be the nominee. Justin Reimer says, if the DNC makes him the 28 pick, I'm abstaining. I'm not falling for their nonsense a fourth time. So Justin Reimer, the DNC doesn't pick who the nominee is. The voter picks. And so are you saying that if the voters vote for Newsom to be the nominee in 28, that you're going to abstain from voting, even if the Republican Party has a significantly worse candidate, Justin? Is that what you're saying? Tyler Hopp says, Newsom isn't the guy for the left. His track record in California is too long and too bad. I don't agree with that. I think it's fine. I think he's made a lot of mistakes, but he's also done a lot of good. Justin Reimer says, tell that to Bernie in 16 and 20. Yeah, the voters picked not Bernie in both of those elections. Astro87 says, who picked Kamala Harris? The voters picked, because she was on the ballot with Biden in the 24 primary, and then when Biden dropped out, Kamala was the natural person to take over. Kamala Harris is not the example that people want it to be of the DNC picking the candidate, because they had like less than 150 days to figure something out. You had red states that were trying to pressure the DNC to make a decision before their convention, you know? So it's like, you know, So Justin, I see what you're doing. I see what you're doing. Use a whole bunch of numbers. Um, Jeremiah says, then explain superdelegates. You're delusional. I believe they got rid of the superdelegates after the 2016 because people didn't like it so much. Bonnie says, when was the last time the Democratic Party held a primary? 2024. Don Lockwood says, LOL, she never made it to Iowa. Okay, I'm not going to defend Kamala Harris, guys, but yeah, it's like it's very silly to argue that the DNC installed Kamala Harris with less than 150 days until the presidential election. It's like, what do you think they should have done? Alex says, what do you think will come first, the release of the E-Files investigation or stopping the files release? I think what we're looking at is a significant delay and a kind of like piecemeal release of the documents. Like they're going to hold certain documents back, claiming that they need them for ongoing investigations. They're going to put out heavily redacted or altered files. As long as Trump's DOJ is in charge of this, they are never going to release anything damning about Donald Trump or Republicans unless they are forced to. And, I guess we'll just kind of have to see how that dynamic plays out because I do not believe that anything incriminating in those files is going to be released without, what do you call it? Without significant enforcement. Jeffrey Weber says, taken down Biden, Dems messed up and won't own it. That is a really weird thing to say, Jeffrey. I don't know what that means. Justin Reimer says they should have held an open primary instead of gaslighting us about Biden. So Justin Reimer, did you read Jake Tapper's book about who knew about Biden's mental state? Because I did. And just based on your statement, it doesn't seem like you did. And if you don't respond to that comment, Justin, I'm going to have to boot you because I do not care for people just spamming the comments with their specific political ideologies. Spazzy McGee says Keem Jeffrey took money from E-Files after the controversy broke. I don't know if that's true. Jeffrey Weber says, in March, get rid of Biden, says Jeffrey Weber. All right, well, that's not answering my question, Jeffrey Weber, so you're out of here. See you later, buddy. Yeah. I'm pretty good at telling when people are not here to listen or engage. They're just here to spam the comments with their own political takes, and that is not what I am here for. TTT says, how much does the DNC pay you? You are a communist traitor. I am none of those things. The DNC does not pay me, and you are out of here. Also, I fucked your mom. Pistachio says, attack, block, mute, block, repeat. That's not what I'm doing, Pistachio. Spazzy McGee says, CNN proved that was true. Prove what was true? Proved that Hakeem Jeffries took money from the E-Files fella after the controversy broke. Okay, well, get rid of Hakeem Jeffries. I'm not fucking married to that dude. Dr. Dick Respect says that DOJ official was already on camera saying they are redacting files before the release. Yes, that is 100% accurate, Dr. Dick Respect. Dr. Dick Respect, I hope that you stick around and continue to ask substantive questions because I love saying ridiculous screen names as I am having very substantive conversations about politics. Super Dan says, what did you think about Jake Tapper's book? I thought it was okay. It seems like there's a lot of really good information in there, Super Dan. Can we please refrain from the name calling? Jake Tapeworm seems a little childish. Like, what the fuck is the point, Triska, I completely agree with that. Lauren, good to see you again. Depressed Panda says, do you think would happen if the SCOTUS overturned Doge versus Ford? I got to be honest, Depressed Panda, I'm not 100% on what that case is. Can you give me a little bit more information and maybe I can help you out? All right, let's get to some of these YouTube and Twitch comments. Alrighty. Misty Lane says, did you see the horrors of socialism bill they're voting on today? Do we really need an entire bill to denounce socialism as if these concepts haven't been drilled into our skulls from birth? Yeah, I'm of two minds about that. Like, on the one hand, it's just like so fucking stupid. But on the other hand, it's like maybe there are Democrats who believe that this will defang whatever right-wing propaganda will come out about the Democrats being socialists and communists and shit like that. And so it's like, I think it's kind of stupid to do it because you're kind of playing into that narrative. I think it's better to sort of like invite the conversation of like, why are you doing this? Like, what is wrong with this? The post office is socialist. The army is socialist. Paved roads is socialist. National parks is socialist. Like, what the fuck is your problem? But I also get it. We are still living in times where there are political consequences to having socialism or communism associated with you. All right, JBA says, do you think Mike Johnson's political career has any chance of surviving the end of the Trump regime, or has he completely destroyed his future in under a year? I mean, there are a lot of Republicans who I don't think are going to be able to maintain um, after Trump is gone. There might be some remnants of MAGA that are continue to vote for these people, but I think everybody on the right is getting tainted by the stain of supporting Donald Trump, ignoring his gross violations and illegality. But yeah, I don't know if I would read Mike Johnson's obituary just yet. Average Joe says, do you agree with AOC and Mamdani that now is not the right time to primary Hakeem Jeffries? Personally, I disagree, but when would be the right time? This far-right movement isn't going to wait for the left to elect a better leader. I'm really curious about what AOC's justification is for that. I think that we should be um, going hard on Democratic leadership that we do not feel is representing us, the voters, well. And I would include Hakeem Jeffries in that. AOC notably was part of the coalition that did not think that Joe Biden should have stepped down after that disastrous debate that he had with Donald Trump. So I wonder if AOC's motivation in that situation and in this situation is in maintaining the stability within the party so that we can start changing the party from within around the edges, like, people like Mamdani. Yeah, where AOC is concerned, I'm pretty confident that her ultimate motive is for the left to gain more political power so that we can actually make the kind of progressive changes that she supports. But yeah, I would love to hear her justification for that. I wonder if she feels the same way about Chuck Schumer. I don't know. Misty Lane says there actually wasn't a primary in 2024. But like, what are you gonna do? Misty Lane, there actually was a primary in 2024. There were a couple of Democrats that were running against Joe Biden, but Joe Biden demolished them. It didn't really make a lot of news because there was no groundswell of support for Dean. I think was the guy's first name. Something was the guy that was running against him. Yeah, there was definitely New Hampshire. I can't remember if there was a North Carolina or South Carolina also. But yeah, there were a couple of states that voted there. Alrighty, let's get back into some of these TikTok comments. All right, Larry Murphy says, "Did the U.S. really go bankrupt?" Not as far as I know. Dr. Chernobyl says, "Do a political rap." No. Sophia says, "Are you Republican?" No. Larry Murphy says, "Do we really have to have a driver's license according to the Constitution to vote?" Larry, because no, you do not have to have a driver's license to vote according to the Constitution. Lovebug USA says AOC and Mamdani both urged DSA not to endorse Chai against Hakeem. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's interesting. I don't know what their justification is, but I have a lot of faith in both of those politicians. So if they think it's a smart thing to do, then I say, let's not press the issue. Bloody Hippo says, "Do you belong to any of the parties? Are you an independent like me?" No, I'm a progressive Democrat. Larry Murphy says, "To drive, yes, you need a driver's license to drive, but I do not believe that is mandated in the Constitution, as the Constitution was written before cars." Fog War Productions says, "What do you think about the high church, low church schism within the GOP? Could you be more specific?" Slut Whisperer says, "Any fellow Diddy-crats?" I'm going to give you a chance to ask a better question before I block you, Slut Whisperer. Justin Reimer says, "If 2024 in your mind constitutes as an open primary, then the DNC should really be paying you." I mean, it was an open primary. It's exactly as open as every other primary, Justin Reimer. Like, what exactly do you think was different about that? Nobody says, "Do you think we'll see any amendments to the Constitution overturned, e.g. the 18th and the 21st? I think it's really unlikely that we'll see a constitutional convention anytime in the near future, unless Democrats get like a massive wins in both 26 and 28. I don't imagine that we're going to start seeing constitutional conventions anytime soon. Okay, Jacob says, "Do you think low testosterone levels have anything to do with your political affiliation?" No, I don't have low testosterone levels, and if you want proof of that, ask your mom. Larry Murphy says, "Then you don't know the Constitution. Have fun." Cool, Larry Murphy. Talk to you later. Lovebug USA says, "How can you be pro-democracy and not want primary challengers to Democratic leadership?" I don't know, Lovebug. I say primary everybody. I have no fucking problem with it whatsoever. But I think there's a difference between some of our progressive leaders like AOC and Mamdani being behind primary challenges and not being behind primary challenges. Like there might be smart political moves for that. I haven't heard the justification. This is all news to me today, so I'm not really sure. What the issue is, but I trust them. Foghorn Production says sectarian differences are starting to rip the conservative movement apart, mainly over Israel. Oh, so is that what you're talking about when you say high church versus low church? Like, which is the high church? Is the high church the one that wants to support Israel, or is that the low church that wants that? Bloody Hippo says, do you think the Democrats will win in 29-26? I think you probably meant 2026. Things are looking good in the polling, but I do not believe that we should use polling to decide whether or not we're going to do work to try to help Democrats win in 26. I think that you should ignore all the polls and just do as much work as you can to elect Democrats in 26 and 28, because the Republican Party has become so wildly extreme. They are doing things that are barbaric and illegal. They are letting Trump get away with shit that is completely unconscionable and corrupt. And they are letting Trump get away with extremely violent political rhetoric, like telling people that Democratic senators should be hung for seditious treason or fucking whatever. And I think that we need to send a message to the Republican Party that shit's not going to stand, and that we are going to vote every single one of them out of office until they fucking come to their senses. Bloody Hippo says, honestly, I agree with you, even though I'm an independent. All right, well, how come you don't want to be a Democrat, Bloody Hippos? Twigart says, they would have been hung in the past, and thank God for Trump doing his job. We do not let people advocate for political violence on my live stream, so you're out of here, Twigart. Also, I fucked your mom. Sonia DeBoss says, thoughts on Mamdani and Trump meeting? I don't know if I would have taken that meeting. I understand, like maybe there's value to appearing like you are willing to work with the other side, but Donald Trump is such a fucking piece of shit liar, and I would be worried that he would, I don't know, release edited footage to make it look like I was doing something that I wasn't doing, or saying something I wasn't saying, or he's going to leave that meeting. He's going to leave that meeting, and Trump is going to go, Mamdani, he begged and pleaded with me. He said, please, sir, I'm so weak and stupid. I need your help to run my city. I'm so overwhelmed. And I just don't think that you should give him the opportunity to do that sort of shit. But who knows? Mamdani is a very savvy political communicator. Additionally, I think that if anybody's going to win the messaging war after their meeting, it's going to be Mamdani. He's very savvy about social media and vertical videos and stuff like that. Okay, JP says, wow, rough morning. When do you expect the e-files to be released? I don't know, but based on the troll activity in my live stream, probably people are trying to affect, the outcomes there. JBA says the DNC may not pick the candidate, but they pick which voters get to pick the candidate, and that might as well be the same thing. Are you referring to like the primary calendar there, JBA? I'm not really sure what you mean. Missy Lane says, how can you think Democrats are communists? They are status quo liberals. They literally believe in capitalism. How can people honestly believe this? That's the thing about anti-Democratic Party messaging, is that because the Democratic Party is a big tent, and we have both our AOC's and our Hakeem Jeffries's, people are able to demonize the Democratic Party as both being too far to the left and too far to the right. And that is why I think that we all need to be part of the project of rejecting all of this propaganda. Misty Lane. Let's see here. It says there was a primary, but like it was as good as it could have been. Literally only had Dean Phillips. I don't think we had a real primary. Trump would have won. I mean, I guess I would ask you, Misty Lane, like, what's the difference between what happened and what's a quote unquote real primary? Because like anybody could have entered that primary, and only Dean Phillips did. There were the exact same hurdles to entry for that primary as every other primary. Like you had to reach certain fundraising goals and support in polling and signatures in various states to get on the ballot. So I guess, yeah, I just don't know what people mean when they say that wasn't a real primary. Okay, getting back into these TikTok comments. Gopi Man says, what are the chances Fame Republicans push for Trump 2028? Before all of the e-files debacle, I would have said 100% they will push for Republicans. Republicans will push for Trump 2028. But now I'm not 100% sure. I'm not so sure. I do think that Trump is going to continue to try to stay president until he's dead. And so whether that means trying to run in 28 or declaring martial law and canceling all elections or trying to do a military coup or whatever, that is, he's still going to try. And whether or not he is successful is, it's still an open question. Okay. Misty Lane says they obviously put all of their eggs in one basket. I mean, yeah, but just because the DNC supports the incumbent doesn't mean that it's not a real primary, right? Like the DNC supports candidates sometimes, and I don't think that that's a great thing to do, but that definitely doesn't mean that it's a bad primary or even a different primary than we've had in the past. Okay, Willie, good to see you again. Dilly Jones says, do you think we will always have private property? I don't see it ending anytime soon. Let's see here. Stupel says, rattlesnake by, I don't know what that means. Please don't spam the comments with words that don't make sense. Jersey Rican says, did you see my comment? Sorry, I have Twitch, and I know you said to DM just to clarify. Oh, yeah, Jersey Rican, yes, I did see your comment. I'm behind on responding to comments. I'm so sorry about that. Okay. Darkin says, someone told me that Obama was a fascist because he used the military, for real. Kimberlina says, if we had universal health care, would there still be private option like with schools? I guess it depends on the legislation, Kimberlina. So that was one of the big arguments in the 2020 primary was if you support universal health care and if you do support universal health care, would you also make private insurance illegal? And some politicians were for that. I believe famously Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders were for that. And others were saying that there should be both universal health care and private insurance if people want to like supplement their healthcare with that, and yeah, I think that even if you had like an Elizabeth Warren or a Bernie Sanders who is open to making private insurance illegal, it is unlikely that that would have passed any time in their administration because that would have had to pass Congress. And even if it was all Democrats, I doubt that there were enough votes to make private insurance illegal. Michael Hutchinson says Jasmine Crockett is in trouble. Is she? I didn't hear anything bad about her. Let's see here. JBA says, yes, the order that the states get to hold their primaries and the way they manage the individual primaries actively favors certain candidates. Yeah, I think that's probably pretty accurate, JBA. I was encouraged by the DNC switching the primary order so that it would not be as, monolithically of a white state as Iowa. Some people criticize. I think it was like South Carolina that they decided to put first instead because Biden has really strong approval there or something like that. I forget it was South and North Carolina. But yeah, I would love to see Georgia go first as a more representative state, a more diverse state. Let's see here. Misty Lane says, sorry if I came off of mean. You never come off as lean, Misty Lane. Don't worry about it. Do you also believe in, do you hear ICE got kicked out of North Carolina in under a week? I think ICE thought like this is a red state, so it should be easy. But yeah, I am so encouraged by people standing up to ICE in a way that is forcing them to back down. And I just hope that people are encouraged by that to do it themselves as well. Let's see here. Kimberlina says, would it still be insurance, though, or just private healthcare where you just pay doctor direct and the insurance would be a moot point? I think, we already kind of have that a little bit right now where certain doctors' offices are like, we don't do any insurance. We just have kind of like our own payment plan. So I don't think that it's one or the other. I think that if private insurance is still legal, then there probably will also be those sort of like doctor-led programs as well, individual office programs. 312MQ says, I didn't hear about ICE getting kicked out. Can you explain? I just believe that there were a lot of protests and people were probably coming out and, getting in between them and the people that they were trying to kidnap. And so, it was just a lot harder than they were anticipating. And so they left, Gmon says, ICE wasn't kicked out of anywhere. They are still there. Well, that's interesting because Misty says that they had to leave Georgia, North Carolina. So yeah, I'm curious what the presence is like. I don't know too much about this. I'm just going off of what comments that I am hearing. D. Scott says, conservative or not, the South is not a fan of the feds. Not really sure what that means, D. Scott. Restoration Station says, do you feel that the EPA is damaging the environment by suing for petty offenses bad for image? So I'm not 100% sure what you're referring to, Restoration Station. I will say that the EPA right now is currently under the control of a Trump nominee. And I can't really remember who it is exactly, but Trump has this habit of nominating people to run agencies that are directly opposed to the goal of that agency. So, like in his first term, he put like a coal magnate in charge of the EPA. I'm sure he put somebody similarly shitty in charge of this EPA. And so, yeah, the person who's in charge is going to be doing the job of the Republican Party of dismantling the EPA because they want companies to be able to do pollution because they believe in giving power to the rich and powerful already. Okay, D. Scott says in regards to how ICE is North Carolina is treating ICE. Oh, I mean, yeah, I'm cool with that. Quentin says, do you think U.S. politics are compromised by Israel? U.S. politics are compromised, Quentin, by anybody that has a lot of money, and that is AIPAC, that is Heritage, that is the Federalist Society, that is Elon Musk, that is Peter Thiel, that is all the fucking tech oligarchs and the Russian oligarchs and shit like that. There are definitely a lot of valid criticisms that people can make specifically about AIPAC and the Netanyahu government in Israel. But I do think it is weird that people think that Israel is controlling our government and not just anybody who has billions and billions of dollars. Shork says, what do you think about reparations? I think it's really important that we do things to bring marginalized communities out of poverty and artificial poverty that they have been put into because of hundreds of years of various types of and various degrees of oppression. But I don't know if reparations is the policy that is going to make that happen. It seems like even Americans who are united in the goal of lifting marginalized communities out of oppressive their oppressive spot in culture, I think that some of them are still hostile to the idea of reparations because for some reason there is a streak of Americans hating when people get something that they did not work for or quote unquote getting something for free. They also don't like, oh, you're going to take money away from somebody whose great 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 grandfather had slaves. Like that doesn't seem fair. That guy didn't do that thing. And so I don't know if that's going to be popular enough to pass in the states. I'm completely open to it. Like I think that one of the easiest and cheapest ways that we can assist impoverished communities is by just giving them money. And that all of these programs that we create with all this red tape and bureaucracy, it's basically just padding to make giving people something so that we can all, do better, more palatable to an America that is like, don't give people things for free. I have to work for shit. Why don't they have to work for shit kind of attitude? Personally, I think that we should be fighting against that attitude in general. So, maybe we can start with that and then we can get to reparations eventually. Farah, Bloody Hippo says, what do you think would happen if AIPAC were to be outlawed? I'm sure that all those billionaires who are giving their money to AIPAC would just give it to a different lobbying organization, and they would probably try to still push for the exact same policies. Fog War Production says Israel and AIPAC are bad for that, but they're not the only ones, i.e., Saudi Arabia, China, etc. Completely agree with that, Fog War Productions. Alrighty, back over to my Twitch and YouTube comments. Average Joe says, I have a hypothesis that I intend on researching this semester for my political science degree. It's generally accepted that foreign policy isn't statistically significant in determining a voter's decision. I believe that it is, especially if it's tied to the perception of a candidate's authenticity. For example, how can a voter trust a candidate that preaches human rights when they refuse to denounce the actions of Israel towards Palestine? I'm curious what you and your viewers think. Average Joe, I think that is a very savvy hypothesis that you have there. And what I think is interesting is how modern of an attitude this is. So I think that you could make a really strong case that this is changing, but it really depends on what the foreign policy is. For example, if Bernie Sanders flubbed one of his Russia answers in 2016, I don't think that that's the reason why he lost the primary to Hillary Clinton, for example, But a Democratic candidate running for president in 28 is 100%. Their vote total is going to be affected by their stance on the Netanyahu government in Palestine. and Republican politicians, their primaries are going to be affected by if they are opposing sending money to Ukraine and Israel, or USAID and shit like that. So yeah, I definitely think that there's meat on the bone there for you. But there are tons of examples pre 2024 of that not being the case. So I think it's interesting that excuse me. I think it's interesting that that has changed in recent history. Okay. Heather G says, we give reparations to billionaires already. Completely agree with that, Heather G. That is the thing that I want to undo in the American culture, is this idea that billionaires getting things for free is fine. That's just rewarding job creators or some shit. But giving a can of soup to a fucking starving child is socialism and bad. I am with you, Heather G. We agree with each other. Let's fucking go. All right, Restoration Station says, thoughts on increased gun laws in city centers but relaxed laws in rural settings. Is that somebody's specific policy? Is that what we currently have, Restoration Station? I'm not really sure what it is that you're referring to. I mean, generally speaking, it's probably the case that Democrats run more cities than rural settings, and Democrats want to have stricter gun control laws to try to stop gun violence, and Republicans don't. And so there are stricter gun laws in cities than there are in rural areas. That's my guess. Kelly McJelly, good to see you again. Guan Amori says, what's the difference between socialism and communism? Socialism is when we all pool our money together and we use a little bit of that money to buy things that are supposedly good for everybody. So, for example, national parks. We all pay taxes to upkeep our national parks. The post office, public education, fire departments, police departments, the military, paved roads, all things that we pay for with our taxpayer dollars. That's socialism. And if you want a shorthand for that, we sometimes refer to universal health care as socialized medicine, because we pay money in the form of taxes, and then our health care gets paid for with those taxpayer dollars. Communism is when workers own the means of production. So in the system that we currently have, the guy who owns the mine makes 99% of the profits from that mine, even though he is not doing the actual mining. Communism says that the workers should be able to own the mine and do the work of the mine so that they can reap more of the profits. And we already have some of that in America too. Any corporation that is owned by the workers, that is employee owned, like Publix grocery stores or Bob's Red Mill or King Arthur Flour, I think it's called, those are all employee owned companies. And I personally think that we should be encouraging companies to be employee owned with things like tax incentives and potentially subsidies. So yeah, that's the difference. Ivan, yes, I did see your TikTok, and I apologize for not getting back to you guys. I'm a little bit behind on getting back to people's messages. Uncle Hippie Dan says it's arguably the American definition, but not according to literature. I'm open to other interpretations or other definitions, Uncle Hippie, but the way that I feel like people on the left describe socialism and communism is that, and it's very specifically that, because that's not scary. We already have that here, and it's already working here. And when people on the left, I believe, say that they want more communism and socialism in this country, that's what they mean. But people on the right will say, oh, you like communism, you love Russia. Oh, you love socialism, you love Venezuela, when those countries are not communist or socialist, just in name only, But yeah, I'm totally open to being proven wrong about that. Let me know. Shork says, do you think legalizing some rugs can help with the fent crisis? Potentially. I'm pretty liberal around that issue. I feel like when you when you do that to rugs, you have more regulation and enforcement. So like somebody they you buy a rug from somebody, and they say it's 100% Egyptian cotton, but then you get home and you walk on it and you're like, oh shit, this rug's been walked on before. You know what I mean? I did not realize how well that was going to work out. They literally call it stepping on rugs. So yeah, if government regulated our rugs, then then there would be policies and laws around stepping on rugs before you sell them. God damn, that that works really well. That really tickles me. What's up, Christmas 2025? All right, let me get back into these Twitch and YouTube comments. Kingston says, I think we should find a way to trick Trump into signing a bill that allows blue states to secede from the union. This way, blue states don't have to listen to a 34-count convicted felon. That's cute, Kingston. I don't think it's going to work out logistically. Misty Lane says, they decided to leave, not kicked out specifically. They hurt. What are you referring to? Oh, ICE. ICE decided to leave. Yeah, not kicked out specifically, but they decided to leave. But like you can't assume they deported every immigrant in under a week. That's just unserious, which leads me to believe it was hard for them. Yeah, I think that somebody on my TikTok was arguing that they're still there. They still have a presence there. But I know you, so I trust that what you're saying is more accurate than that person over there. Average Joe says the authenticity angle extends to Trump. Also, he ran on isolationist agenda, but was primarily elected because of economic perceptions. But his recent foreign policy actions have estranged a decent portion of his base. Yeah, I think you have, again, I think you have a really solid foundation for something really interesting there, Average Joe. Okay, let's see here. Back in the TikTok comments. John868 says, do you think Mamdani is a good idea? I do. I mean, he's a person, he's not an idea, but I do think that electing him was a good idea. Tagaret says, do you know how many nuclear devices are stored in red states versus blue states? I don't. Generally speaking, we can say that nuclear devices are more likely stored in rural areas than in urban areas. And so it is likely that they are in the jurisdiction of conservatives more than Republicans. But that is, just a solid guess on that's a full-on guess from my noodle. Lehman 804 says, how can the Democrats get as good at marketing, i.e. propaganda, as the Republicans? So Lehman, I have a controversial take about the Democrats' messaging strategy, which is that they are playing a game that is rigged against them, and that is the reason why we think they are terrible at messaging. They have a lot less money behind them for their super PACs. The information channels are all owned by billionaires, and billionaires tend to lean conservative. Tech oligarchs tend to lean conservative. The Democratic Party is a rainbow coalition, meaning there's a bunch of different little groups that are all trying to pull the messaging in their specific direction. And all of that makes what they are trying to do a lot harder than what the Republicans have to do. Republicans have this massive propaganda network that pushes forward every possible narrative that assists them in convincing people of their bullshit. They even have really sneaky and subversive propaganda channels. Like there used to be this whole network of fake online newspapers that all had regional names that made it sound like local news operations, like the Tampa Gazette and some shit like that. And then those were just all straight right-wing propaganda. They have a lot more money behind them because they cut taxes for billionaires, so billionaires give them a lot more money to win elections and spread their propaganda narratives. Are there things the Democratic Party can be doing better messaging-wise? 100%, absolutely. But I think it's, illuminating that it is only the top 5 messaging Democrats that usually are able to break through past all of the billionaire roadblocks. And meanwhile, any fucking idiot Republican can become completely newsworthy, like fucking Ted Cruz or Josh Hawley or, who else do I hate on the right? Fucking Mike Johnson, shit like that. Okay. Joel Ant says social media ban Trump, silence COVID questioners, etc., but tech leans conservative? ? Yes, Joel Ant, and the things that you said about social media banning Trump and silencing COVID questioners are what's the word I'm looking for? Exceptions and not the rule. Especially if we're looking at right now, Joel, where I'm sure an argument could be made that they were a little bit more centrist or socially liberal, fiscally conservative in the past. But now social media companies are owned by billionaires that are in the pocket of the Republican Party. End of story. And if you want more information on that, I'm happy to give that. If you still don't believe me, send me a DM and I'll give you all the data. But if you if you're not asking in good faith, like if you're literally just trying to say I'm wrong and I'm an idiot, then then we can end this conversation now. Alrighty, let's see here. Misty Lane over on YouTube says you can make 30K a week for 10,000 years and still not be a billionaire. If you make 500K a year, are taxes going to hurt you? I have a theory that people vote based on fear of losing what they have. The problem with Democratic messaging is like, let's go back to the way things were. That doesn't work for me. I'm 25. I don't remember a time when things were normal. I'm just a baby girl. Yeah, like I said, Misty Lane, I definitely think that there are issues with Democratic messaging, but I don't think that they are as bad as some Republican messaging that for some reason then gets decried as being brilliant and just like unstoppable messaging strategy, when in reality it's just because they have way more billionaire dollars behind them, they have a larger propaganda network behind them, yeah, and other reasons as well. But yeah, I'm really curious about. I mean, I agree with you about all of your, no one's going to be a billionaire. You are way closer to being a homeless person than a billionaire, of course. Let's see here. Going back seems horrible. How are we moving forward? I want to see a future. Give me hope, guys. That's it. What do you guys think? Yeah, I agree, Missy Lane, 100%. Okay, Joel Ant says, do you have examples of widespread suppression of liberal ideologies in social media? Yeah, 100%. X, TikTok, YouTube, like all of those push right-wing propaganda narratives and silence left-leaning voices. 100%. Haven't you heard the stories, Joel Ant, about all of the, all of the data scientists who followed, YouTube suggestions until they eventually got to right-wing propaganda, anti-Semitic propaganda, stuff like that? Do you think that X is now a bastion of liberal free speech where all voices are hyped up equally? Do you think that TikTok, attempting to stay alive in Trump's America, is doing anything to hype up left-leaning voices? All right, Fogwell Productions, great to see you again. Let's see here. Michael B says, thoughts on Trump inviting the founder of Syria Al-Qaeda branch to the White House. So while I think that, we can 100% criticize Trump for a lot of the meetings that he's having, like with the Saudis and with the Qataris, for example, but Syria very specifically, I think is a different issue, because Syria was being run by a despot named Bashar, I believe, and he was overturned by the people. It is exactly the way that regime change should happen, is from within the government as opposed to America invading Venezuela, for example. I don't know why I just thought that example just kind of like popped into my head. Crazy hypothetical. So the guy who is now in charge of Syria is former Al-Qaeda, and he has promised that he is going to run a not Al-Qaeda style Syria. And, so America has lifted sanctions that we had against Syria, and we are opening diplomatic relations with that specific leader because we want to encourage him to make good on his promises. And if he doesn't, then we can always go ahead and re-sanction him and people in his government. But for now, I think it's probably the smart thing to do to give him the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, you say you're going to be better? Prove it. Go for it. Be better. And thank you to everybody who helped me reach my gift goal. It happened a while ago. And I literally just got around to thanking Triska and Muzzking and Ryzen and Counting Blocks. Y'all guys are dope as hell. I don't know what's going on with my throat today. I need like a glass of water or something. But, we've only got about 12 minutes left in the live stream, so I'll just try to suffer through it. Less Than Optimal says, what do you think about ANCAP? Did you mean APAC, Less Than Optimal? Let's see here. Oof. Michael B says, I see your point, but since when does America give terrorist leaders, quote unquote, the benefit of the doubt? I mean, I guess there's an important distinction there, is that he is a former terrorist leader and not a current terrorist leader. Now he is the leader of a country, and a leader that is promising that he has put away all of his all of his terrorist ideologies and practices. So, you know, I mean, Trump had the fucking Taliban over to Camp David. So since when have we been giving terrorist leaders the benefit of the doubt? I guess since 2020, which is when that meeting happened. You know. All right, Pink Scroll says some Christian nationalists are trying to take over our country. How easy to take away tax exempt status from churches? I think it's the executive could do it pretty easily as long as you had a president who was willing to do it. I'm pretty sure, but double check me on that. Kai says, can you explain the difference between a liberal and a leftist because I'm so confused? So Kai, I don't really truck with a lot of those semantic distinctions between the different wings of the parties, but I believe, and I could be wrong about this, I believe that a leftist is sort of like the progressive, further left wing, like your AOC's is and your Bernie Sanders is, and liberals are the more centrist ones, like your Chuck Schumer's is and Hakeem Jeffries and Nancy Pelosi's and stuff like that. Let's see here. Michael B says, since Trump, LOL. Good point, LMAO. I should have seen that coming. Yeah, for real, man. Musking says, Joel isn't going to respond. Most likely he left. Oh, was I talking to Joel? I don't remember talking to Joel. Thank you, Sonia DeBoss. Okay, scrolling up. Kitten Caboodle says, thoughts on communism. We already have communism here in America, Kitten Caboodle. Not even sure if you're still here yet. If you're still here. Yeah, any company that is owned by its employees. So Publix grocery stores, you know, Bob's Red Mill, they make oatmeal and grains and shit like that. Those are both employee-owned companies, and they do great, and I think we should have more in this country. Okay, D. Scott says, liberal wants change using the current system, a leftist wants the system revamped. Oh, that's interesting, you know. Oh, I guess Joel is still here. How about that? Dylan J. LeBlanc says 2025 liberals are pretty much conservatives. I suppose an argument could be made. I don't know if I'm going to sign off on that. 101 Cobbs says, what's your take on what Caroline said about President Ramaphosa? Ramaphosa these nuts? Is that what you're trying to say? I don't know what. If that's a bit, I don't know. I don't get it. And if it's a real thing that happened, I don't know who that person is. Jackboy says, take on Jesus Christ. He seemed like a pretty good guy. You know, he believed in feeding the hungry and clothing the unclothed and housing the unhoused and healing the sick. He believed in do unto others as you would have them do unto you. He believed in, you know, treating the stranger as your neighbor, loving thy neighbor, turning the other cheek, you know, the Good Samaritan. All that good shit is Jesus Christ shit. I'm about that Jesus Christ, not the, you know, if you get an abortion, you're going to hell. If you're gay, you're going to hell. And if you have a ton of money, that means that God loves you, because otherwise, why would he let you have a ton of money? Jack Rafferty says, e-files being released. Democrats need to shut up now. No, Jack. Carmine says, being chilled to immigrants. Hell yeah. Dylan says, Jesus would not approve of MAGA. 100%. Jackboy says, do you think he resurrected? Probably not, because that's physically impossible, but you know, there are more things between heaven and earth ratio than are dreamt of in our philosophy. So I guess it's possible. Jackboy says, do you not think life starts at conception? I don't personally believe that. So I am pro-choice. But even if you're pro-life, I still think you should vote for Democrats, because Republican policies don't actually decrease or get rid of abortion. They just make pregnancy more dangerous for women. I can talk more about that if you like. Michael B32 says, what do you think will be the next GOP spin for the e-files? So it's going to be a bunch of obstruction and subversion and lying. So they're going to release some files that are going to specifically target anybody on the left or anybody that Donald Trump doesn't like that associated with Epstein. And then they're going to say, all right, that's it. You know, and then other people are going to go, no, you're lying. There's more stuff. And then they're going to release some redacted files that have Trump's name taken out of them, and they're going to say, look, he's completely exonerated. And then they're going to lie about that for a long time, and then there's going to be legal battles about trying to get the rest of the files. And I mean, until we have a different people in charge of the Attorney General's office and the DOJ and the executive, then I don't believe we're going to see any incriminating evidence against Donald Trump. You know, the courts could try to force all of the files you know, he signed a bill saying that the files are going to be released, and the courts could force him to uphold that bill, but how much power does the judiciary have over the executive? It's still an open question, unfortunately. So we'll just have to kind of wait and see. Jack Rafferty says, "Do you support Biden Harris?" I did in the past, but they're no longer running, so I do not any longer. Let's see here. Jersey Rican says, "Has increased in Texas and other pro-life states." I believe what Jersey Rican is making at was saying was that infant and maternal mortality has increased in Texas and other pro-life states, meaning more children that are trying to be born and women that are pregnant are dying because of abortion bans in Texas and other pro-life states. And that is 100% accurate, unfortunately. 1001 says, "What's your take on Trump's behavior towards other countries?" I mean, there are so many things that are wrong with Trump's behavior towards other countries, both like on an individual basis, like when he's meeting with world leaders, but also like his State Department and his foreign policies. Like, it's difficult to summarize it other than to say it is a giant pile of shit. Joel Ant says, "Why wasn't mainstream media this vocal about the e-files during the Biden administration?" Well, there's a difference, I think, between what was going on then and what was going on now, Joel. So what was going on then was these files were locked up in an ongoing case. And then once they were released, once that case was over, Democrats did push for those files to be released. But the president of the United States at the time, Joe Biden, never made any promises about releasing those files, and neither did any of his, messaging captains. But that's the opposite of what Donald Trump did, where Donald Trump and all of his acolytes were saying that they were 100% going to release them. And that's the reason why a lot of people voted for him. And then once he got into office, they started, equivocating and doing word salad and lying about it. And so that became the story. The story is, you said you were going to do this. You said that you were going to do this to prove that you had done nothing wrong. And now you are saying you're not going to, and now you're lying about it. And now you're having fake press conferences with binders full of information that you say are the e-files, but they're not actually the e-files. Like, that is a different story, There are a lot of reasons why those files didn't come out during the Biden administration, but, the fact of the matter is, like, it's more of a story now because of that. Jersey Rican, yes, I got your meaning, though. I got your meaning. Okay, Joel, you have proven to me that you are here in good faith. I really appreciate you being here. Even though I can tell by your questions that we are not aligned politically, you are a welcome member of the live stream. Michael B says, "Texas gerrymander getting blocked and Cali having Prop 50 should be interesting." Yeah, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, Michael, where there used to be a provision in Prop 50 that we would undo our gerrymander if Texas undid their gerrymander, but apparently that's no longer in the bill. And so California can just keep their maps even if Texas's maps get struck down. Either way, if California gets to keep their maps, then that is going to be a massive advantage for the Democratic Party, because even if the Supreme Court undoes that ruling for Texas, some of those districts might have been gerrymandered too hard. And so Democrats might actually get more representation in Texas if the gerrymander stays than if it goes, So we're just going to have to wait and see, of course. But I do think it's interesting that there's so many, different, possibilities for the future, All right, let's get back into these Twitch and YouTube comments. All right, Space Plum, good to see you again. Average Joe says, "Do you think we should address wealth hoarders the same way we address material hoarders, like New Discovery Channel series? There's a therapist addressing their psychological breakdown, while a got junk crew wheels pallets of cash and Bitcoin servers out of their home." That is very funny, Average Joe. I really like that idea. Obviously, they're not going to go for it, of course, but it is a sickness. It is 100% like they have got greed sickness. Misty Lane says, "Leftist is more into like socializing things. Liberals like a little capitalism sprinkled in. Leftists want something like FDR. Liberals want like, Obama era policy, maybe a little bit better. The most ideal form of leftist in America is like FDR, but a little more extreme, and liberals' ideal form is Obama without the 2008 crash." Well, that's interesting. This is the reason why I am a little bit allergic to these semantic differences, is because different people have different definitions. It's the reason why I don't like using the word Zionist, is because some people believe that means that people that are living in Israel should have the right to stay there if they want to. And some people believe that that means that Israel should be ascendant in that region and that they are justified in nuking all of their neighbors, you know? And so you have a person out there saying, they're Zionists saying that they're a good guy for not thinking that Israelis who did nothing fucking wrong should be kicked out of their houses. And other people that call themselves, and if I call myself a Zionist, then you might say, oh, so you believe that Israel should be able to do war crimes against the people of Palestine, and that's fine, you know? Shit like that. Alrighty. Average Joe says, would it be a compromise with the pro-forced birth crowd if abortions are made illegal, but it's also illegal to use a patient's medical record to press charges or get convicted of a crime? Honestly, that feels like a fucking Rube Goldberg that is made to either be exploited for bad faith actors or just tumble on its own weight. Yeah, that seems like way more complicated than it needs to be, because the pro-forced birth crowd doesn't want there to be a path forward for any abortions. You know, they say in the case of rape and incest, they say in for the life and health of the mother, but when you actually look at the states that are doing it, there's a reason why some women are dead right now, and it is because they did not take those things into consideration. So yeah, I don't think there's any compromising with that specific crowd. We already gave them a compromise of, all right, well, we're only going to do it after this many weeks. And they were like, no, none, zero. From the moment of conception, done. Obviously, not everybody who is pro-life is that extreme, but I'm talking about how these Republicans are actually legislating. You know, they're legislating like zero tolerance policy. Alrighty. Space Blum says, good to see you again. Problem with your channel is that I'm always late to the party. No, man. People that come into my live streams are like fucking Gandalf in Lord of the Rings. You're never late and you're never early. You always arrive exactly when you should. Okay. Misty Lane says, if you want pro-life to end, make forced fatherhood. Most men would instantly become pro-choice. That is a fun idea, Misty Lane. I do like that. Konetable says, should Israel exist? I don't have a problem with Israel existing as it currently exists. Should it have been created the way that it was? I think an argument could be made that the answer is no, and that it's caused a lot of tension and harm in that area. But there are people living there right now who are perfectly nice people that are just trying to live their fucking lives, and I don't think that we should remove them. CS says, is there a way to get a push notification when you go live? I have no idea. CS179206. I don't know if there's I don't know what the notifications settings are like on your phone and stuff. So yeah, I don't know. Are you a member of the Discord? CS, are you a member of the bulletin board on TikTok? Because those are places that I can put like a notification before I go online, and then maybe you will get that notification. Kimberlina, did you hear about the 2 men from Texas charged with plot to attack the island? I have not heard about that. Michael B32 says, Texas gerrymander getting blocked. Oh yeah, I already did that one. Okay, yeah, it looks like comments are kind of slowing down, so maybe we'll start wrapping things up. I mean, we're at an hour, which is usually when we wrap up anyways. Z Saro says, LOL, you remember Gandalf, but not gold sickness. Oh, yeah, I mean, I could have used that, of course. CS says, what is the bulletin board? Bulletin board is a new feature on TikTok where if there's a creator you like, then you can sign up to their bulletin board and you'll get notifications whenever they post things or post a new video or stuff like that. I think that they are trying to reorganize TikTok in a way that you see more of the people that you follow as opposed to just your sort of like algorithm curated for you page. Okay. All right, everybody. I'm going to start wrapping things up. Get in your final questions. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you for all your supports and your comments and your questions. Special thank you to Joel, who I know we disagree, but when somebody is able to write good answer to somebody that they disagree with politically, that is exactly the kind of person that I want to have in my live stream, you know. And I look forward to having you back here again. Michael B says, what's your normal live stream schedule? It is Monday through Friday, starting around 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. The schedule is updated regularly on my Twitch calendar, on my TikTok calendar, and on my personal calendar. Michael B., did you know that that is normally what I say during my outro? Were you feeding me that on purpose? Because if so, I'm about that. And that's a note to all my regulars. If you know I'm about to wrap things up, you can start asking me questions like, do you have a Discord? Or can I send you a message when you're not live streaming? Michael B says, I was not first timer, LOL. Well, that's very funny, Michael B. Kimberlina says, and what are we supposed to do? The work, Kimberlina. We're supposed to do the work. So yeah, if you have any questions that I was not able to get to on this live stream, or you think of things other times, feel free to reach out to me. I'm generally pretty good about responding to messages, even though I had 2 people on my live stream today who were asking me, did you get my message? Because I forgot to respond to them. But yeah, DMs are open. Email me through my website. Hit me up on my Discord server. I want to be a resource for you guys to be more informed and more involved in politics. The 2 I's. And so if I can be that resource for you, I want you to use me until I am all used up. The Discord is my favorite resource because in addition to being a great place to get in touch with me, you can also communicate with other people in the Ask Me Anything About Politics, Political Cues with Jarrett B. Community. And also there's great recommendations there for podcasts and books, and also great organizations to donate to or volunteer to. I just learned that Swing Left, which is an organization that I have liked for a very long time, that actually worked with to sign up new voters in 2020, they are starting a new deep canvassing project, which is aiming to fix what is wrong with door knocking right before elections. And it is exactly the right thing to do. And it makes me so fucking excited to know that Swing Left is doing this. And so if you are looking for places to volunteer or places to donate, the Swing Left initiative that they are calling Ground Truth is exactly where we should be putting our time and energy these days. It is the perfect voter outreach, in my opinion. Okay, so let's see here. What else? Discord. Hit me up if you need. I already did my schedule. If you want to support the show financially, you can, but you don't have to. I have a Patreon that you can join for as little as $1 a month. You have a store that you can buy things from. Links to both of those things are in my bio. And you can also send gifts and become super fans on TikTok and Twitch and YouTube. If you have Amazon Prime, you can subscribe to me on Twitch for free. And it doesn't cost you anything, but I get a couple of bucks from that, and very much appreciate everybody that's done that already. Every little bit helps to keep this show alive. And a special shout out to my patrons, Robert, Shannon, Carmine, and Patrick, and my super fans on TikTok, Susie, Sean, Dan, and Hot Sauce. And lastly, just my heartfelt plea for everybody to do the work. Enjoy your weekend, everybody. Have a great time. But when Monday rolls back around, we got to be out there recruiting and convincing and calling our reps and volunteering to organizations and talking to people that we know. That is the only way that we get out of this. We can have a better country. We don't have to be worried about, what's going to happen if I get sick, or how am I going to afford this, while fucking billionaires are riding around on their golden yachts doing fucking caviar and cocaine bumps for fucking 3 meals a day, Jersey Rican says, do I look for you on Twitch? I mean, you can. You just got to Google Jarrett Bernstein, I believe. User says, does he read comments? LOL. Yes, but I was in the middle of my outro, user. Carmine says, how busy do you get during Mother's Day? Very busy with all the haters as moms, Carmine, obviously. My mom is very understanding when I forget to send her a Mother's Day card, because she's like, I know my son is busy doing the Lord's work. I appreciate that, Jersey Rican. Again, it costs you $0 and it helps me out a little bit. So thank you again, everybody, for being here. Thank you for all the questions and everything. Misty Lane, it was so great to see you again. JP, Average Joe, Z, Saro, Space Plum, Kingston, everybody in the Twitch and YouTube sphere. There are so many fewer of you that I want to make sure that you guys know that I appreciate you. And of course, the TikTok people are great. Johnny Cake says, here's the thing about TikTok. It makes a lot of people that have no talent think they actually have talent. That's probably true, Johnny Cakes, but if that's what you're saying about me, then maybe you should ask your mom about how much talent my dick has. All right, everybody. Thank you again for being here. Have a great weekend. Be good to each other. Be good to yourselves. Self-care is part of the work, and I will see you guys on Monday. Same bat time, same bat channel. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Goodbye, 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 goodbye. Goodbye.